Alright, so no doubt you guys are here because you want to learn how to put those pesky, annoying druids into the ground, and I'm here to show you just how to do that, so let's get into it. First, let's quickly go over the talents and glyphs that you need to take when you're fighting against the balanced druid. First of all, you'll need to take Chi Explosion, and the reason for this is because against balanced druids, you're going to be getting kited the entire time. And because we lost things like Healing Spheres and Spitting Fire Blossom when Warlords of Draenor was released, it makes it difficult as a monk to suppress them at a range and keep ourselves alive without having to stop and cast Surging Mist. So we take Chi Explosion so that we can pressure them at a range and also build up a lot of stacks of Tiger Eye Brew to eventually wear them down. Hurricane Strike isn't terrible and I do use it sometimes, but that's basically because I was too lazy to change it. But the reason why it's not so good against balanced druids is because of an ability called Bark Skin. It's usable while stunned and it reduces the damage they take by 20% and reduces their chance to be critically hit, which turns Hurricane Strike's damage into nothing. But with Chi Explosion you can constantly apply pressure with 10 stacks of Tiger Eye and get a lot more uptime on them when they don't have Bark Skin available, which can put them on a defensive and it also helps you keep yourself alive for much longer. All the other talents are essentially personal preference. For example, you can take Tiger's Lust to help you get out of entangling roots, but I take Celerity because I like the extra charge of Chi Torpedo and the reduced cooldown. Also, Diffuse Magic can be powerful, but while it's on cooldown you don't have healing elixirs to maintain your health, and you'll find that your HP will decline very quickly afterwards. Next, let's quickly cover glyphs. Touch of Karma glyph is a must-have because Boomkins will be kiting you constantly, and if at any time you need to Karma, odds are they'll be far away from you, so you need this glyph to account for that. I also personally recommend that you take Freedom Roll, because they can get out of all your slows and roots, so if they're specced into Fairy Swarm, and you don't have Freedom Roll, you'll be stuck in that slow permanently, which will make locking them down near impossible because you'll be slowed and they won't be. The last glyph I use is Touch of Death, and I take that everywhere because every time I didn't have it, I wasn't able to secure a kill because I didn't have the Chi for it. But another good potential glyph is Glyph of Zen Meditation, so you can move towards them while taking 90% less damage, essentially acting as a diffuser magic with a longer cooldown. Now onto the actual fighting strategy. Let's look at druids in general first, and then we'll go into how to counter druids using Incarnation, and druids using Force of Nature. Druids will likely start the fight by going into stealth. This is so they can open up on you with entangling roots to keep you at bay, and sometimes you can catch them while they're casting it and stop it with paralysis, but I don't have this happen often. One really important thing to do against druids is to heal when you are stuck in roots, and this accomplishes two things. Firstly, you are avoiding doing nothing, and doing nothing is the absolute worst thing you can possibly do. If you spend 8 seconds in entangling roots doing nothing, that's 8 seconds of potential Surging Mist spamming that was wasted. In fact, this will probably be the only time that casting Surging Mist is appropriate. Since you have to stop in place to heal anyway, the best thing to do while stuck in place is to heal. And secondly, the druid will likely use Solar Beam, which is his interrupt and his silence, to stop you from healing. If he does this, then you have freedom to use Zen Meditation to avoid his damage later, while Solar Beam is on cooldown. This can be a game changer if you use Zen Meditation against his burst and he has no way to stop it. So basically you heal to avoid doing nothing, and you heal to force him to use his Solar Beam, so you have freedom to Zen Meditation later on in case of emergency. Now one thing that I cannot stress enough is to practice getting your Chi Torpedoes and your rolls on point, because that's basically the only way you're going to be able to catch up to him. And if you miss 3 rolls and you get him with a Serpent Kick later and you slow him, he will most likely just use Displacer Beast, and then you have nothing to catch up to him. This is something that you actually need to go out and practice because it involves aiming and anticipating where the druid is going to be. You want to look at where they are going, and then take into account the distance you are from them and then roll to where they will be, but if you try to roll to where they are, and they aren't standing still, then you'll just end up missing it and you'll have to use another one. Using 1 roll instead of 3 to catch up to a druid is a big deal. Other than that, your main goal is to lock them in stuns while you're using Tiger Eye Brew, to force Bark Skin and or Trinket. And with Chi Explosion you will have 10 stacks of Tiger Eye Brew much more often, ready to burst. For example, if you paralyze them, and then you have 10 stacks of Tiger Eye Brew with Fist of Fury, they will use Bark Skin most likely, or risk taking massive damage. After your Fist of Fury is off cooldown you can leg sweep them, and likely by this point you'll have 10 stacks again if you have good uptime on the druid, so then they have no Bark Skin and will Trinket it. Winning against the druid involves periodically tearing at their defenses, and to avoid being kited as much as possible so that we can eventually lock them down when they have nothing. Also, try to keep druids slowed as much as you can, but this can prove very difficult. And at the same time you have to maintain your own health, and that's what we'll get into next. Surviving against the Boomkin can be tough, but there are a number of ways to assist with surviving. First, as I mentioned earlier, heal while stuck in roots, and the reason for this is it maximizes the amount of Surging Mist casts you'll get on yourself, and keeps you alive for longer. Also, make sure that you always combine Tiger Eye Brew with Expel Harm once each time you use it. This is because Tiger Eye Brew lasts 15 seconds and Expel Harm has a 15-second cooldown, meaning that you'll always be able to get one cast of it during the uptime of your offensives, which will amplify its healing by a lot. and the more times you use healing with your stacks, the better. Now let's specifically talk about druid specs into Incarnation. These druids will have insane burst damage and will not be timid about using their cooldowns, because Incarnation combined with their other offensives mean they'll be able to do incredible damage. Against Incarnation druids, you need to keep yourself alive through their cooldowns by using your defensives. If you live through Incarnation, then killing them later will be a lot easier, because their damage will drop by a lot. And their kiting ability in comparison to druids who use Force of Nature is much less, but we'll get to them in a second. So to counter their Incarnation, you could use Touch of Karma. This is essentially 10 seconds of their 30-second burst gone. Next, you can use Surging Mist and try to bait their Solar Beam if they haven't used it already, but if they have, then you are free to use Zen Meditation for 8 seconds. You can also use your Fortifying Brew as well. Also, using your stuns and paralysis while they burst is good because it usually results in them trinketing, so they can keep bursting you, which makes it easier to kill them later. Against Force of Nature druids though, and Force of Nature is when they summon little tree minions which cast Entangling Roots, these druids are much harder to catch, but their burst damage isn't as high, meaning that it's easier to survive for longer, but it means that for them as well. Against these druids, your cheetah pittos, rolls, and serpent kicks need to be very accurate, so practice that. And just apply every other bit of advice I've given you to this fight. Healing when stuck in place, forcing defensives, and getting as much uptime on them while sustaining yourself. Also, try to save your defensives for as long as possible against Force of Nature druids. They can wear you out by kiting if you make too many mistakes, forcing you to use your defensives, and then they can use their cooldowns and burst into you and easily win. Now with all that being said, I do want to point out that druids are much harder to beat in the open areas like Elwyn Forest, where I am dueling. If you apply these tricks in an area where there's line of sight and freedom to heal and thrive using Transcendence, beating a Boomkin if you play it right is almost guaranteed in an arena such as Tiger's Peak. If you want to see how I survive against Boomkins in an arena, I'll leave a link in the description to a video of me surviving against a Boomkin and a healer until maintenance started. I think it went for over 10 minutes in total, but I shortened it by speeding it up. So you can watch that and look at what I do and try it. Other than that, all I can say is practice a lot. And I've said this once and I'll say it again, I can make these guys as in-depth as I possibly can and go into every single little detail, but in the end, you are the one that has to go out there and practice. And you have to learn how to react to that class yourself. I'm just here to show you the most important parts, but the rest is up to you. And that's it for this guide. I hope you have learnt something, and that I have helped you in any way. If you feel as though I haven't covered something properly, or if you still have any questions, feel free to leave a comment and I'll respond to it as soon as I possibly can. Anyway, I hope you all have an awesome day, and I'll catch you guys a little later. See yas!